talked about yesterday, the different types of protective equipment. And what else did we talk about in that particular module? The fact that in an emergency, normal protective equipment may not be enough. So that's one of the things the safety officer does, is makes that determination. The other thing is that it can be expanded and contracted as needed. There might be a small emergency. Say I spill a liter of wall paint up here. That's a small emergency. I could probably clean that up myself. But what if a tanker truck full of paint spills on the street out in front of campus here? That would involve a giant cleanup. So this system is designed to allow expansion in a big emergency or contraction as the emergency becomes more contained. So this is a basic flow chart for what the positions that we fill during an emergency. At the top is the incident commander. The incident commander is the captain of the cricket team. He or she controls the motions and the activities of the rest of the team. Down below, you'll see a few other positions. I mentioned the safety officer. We've understood that the safety officer helps ensure that any responders are safe during an emergency. But somebody who's become really important is the public information officer. Why? Because we know all of you have cell phones and lots of things get posted on social media. So how many times have you seen on a YouTube or Insta or wherever you've seen it, somebody standing there watching an emergency, filming it, say, oh, look what's happening, look what's happening. The problem is you only see what's happening and you don't know the backstory to what happened. That's what the public information officer does. The public information officer controls the flow of information, not only to you as the general public, but to the responders and the agencies as well. Below that is the liaison officer. The liaison officer helps coordinate the efforts because, as I mentioned, you're going to have a lot of moving parts in an emergency. You may have equipment coming in to help clean up the spill, or you may have, you may need a helicopter to air vac somebody that's injured to a big hospital someplace. So that person helps coordinate all of those different positions. Now, they call those top positions the command staff. Down below, they call those positions the general staff. I'll talk about those a little bit. So I'll just flip to the next slide. So first let me talk about the incident commander or the cricket team captain. They have the overall responsibility for managing the situation. And the reason why that is so important is if we had an entire team of cricket captains, do you think that they would play very well? Probably not, because too many people would be trying to make decisions about what play they're going to make next to win the game. And the same holds true in an emergency. We need one person that sits at the top that says, okay, we all have discussed what's going on here, and this is what we're going to do. They also have to be fully briefed. You need all that information. That's where the public information officer comes in. That's what the logistics officer helps with. And they provide all of that information to the incident commander so that they can make good, informed decisions. The other thing is, legally, we have to identify who that person is. It could be more than one person. Say you have a factory with 3 shifts. We might have 3 incident commanders to address those different shifts. But I guarantee you, somewhere there's a document that says these 3 people or these 6 people are going to be the ones who are responsible for acting in this position. The other piece of it is that the incident commander makes a decision about how much personnel will be dispatched in each given emergency. I will note, as I said before with my paint example, that not necessarily all positions will be filled. My 1 liter paint spill up here, I can probably clean up myself, so I can fulfill the role of incident commander, safety officer, and everything in between by myself. But my example of the paint tanker, having a crash out in front of campus, would involve all the positions that I talked about earlier. Okay, so it's important, like I said, to have the overall command and control, one person at the top. That same person has a lot of responsibility. If you're going to be an incident commander, you go through a lot of training, continuous training. And Robin, in the previous presentation, talked about HAZWOPER training, which is emergency responder training. I would say most of the people, if not all of the people in the incident wreck out in front of campus, it could close the road down. It could make your families concerned, oh, is my child going to make it home from school today? So we have to look at all the aspects like that, not just the responder safety, but can I ensure your safety to go past that incident so that you can get home? The other important thing for the incident commander is to act as a liaison between the different agencies. And I guarantee if you have a big tanker spill out in front of campus, you're going to have local people here. You might have people from the State Pollution Control Board here, the fire department, the people in the ambulance, the hospitals may want to know what's going on. So there's a lot of different people that and agencies that need to be integrated, and the incident commander is responsible for that. And as the situation gets better, let's say we've cleaned up that tanker spill, we've now opened the road, they can reduce the number of people involved. An operations officer is typically going to be the plant engineer or the maintenance engineer, the person that understands all the different aspects of how a factory or how the college works. If I need to turn off the HVAC system, if I need to turn the water supply off, that person will help do that. The liaison officer may help coordinate that, but for me personally, I oftentimes go for the operations officer first. So I've mentioned some of these different aspects of what the public information officer does. When I first started doing this, and I am sometimes an incident commander, this position wasn't as important as it is now. Now I have to confess, the other thing, as I mentioned, that you have to look at is we have internal and external audiences. So you all today are my internal audience, but your families or your communities are the external audience. And we have to look at all of that as we try to provide information to all of what we call the stakeholders. Duties of the safety officer. Again, I've hit on this a bit, but the safety officer has a critical role. If you are my emergency responders, you want to make sure that your safety officer knows exactly what's going on. Why? Because that person is going to make the decision about what protective equipment that you wear to go in to respond to that emergency. When the situation becomes too dangerous for you to continue your response. That happens. I've had to act as safety officer before, and there's times where we say the response team can't stand anymore. Their protective equipment isn't sufficient at this point. Maybe we're doing air monitoring and we see the contaminant is going up, so we might have to pull them out. So this person is very critical in the fact that they are your first line of healthcare. They need to know what you need to be, how you need to be protected and what you need to be protected from. And I will just say this, in an emergency, say a warehouse is burning and there's a ton of drums in there with different chemicals, how easy do you think it would be to predict what protective equipment you might need to wear? Pretty hard, right? Because you have the fire going, there's all these different barrels that are involved, and you can't just say, oh, it's one chemical and that's the one that's burning. It's multiple chemicals, and that makes it a very big challenge for somebody doing this job. I mentioned the liaison officer. The biggest thing is coordination in an emergency. I won't belabor this slide, but their job is to provide answers to the questions of what is needed, how to coordinate things, and to ensure that the agencies are coordinated as well. So the general staff, you can see, obviously we have logistics. That's who helps us get equipment in there. Planning. Not all emergencies are solved like on a TV episode where we have 30 minutes and everything is fine by the end of the 30 minutes. It doesn't work that way. I think many members of our team can tell you we've had projects, emergency response projects, that may not be emergencies anymore, but they've lasted more than 1 year, maybe 5 years, where the cleanup, like what happened in Kuwait, could go for even decades. So there's a lot that goes into all of that. And each one of these people will help coordinate that. The finances, how are we going to pay for the cleanup? Who's responsible for paying? That's always a big question. Who has to pay? So say the financial person will keep track of all of that. And please know that if you have emergencies, the response is going to be expensive, many rupees. So keeping track of the expenses is very important. As I mentioned, I think the operations officer is very important. It's a person that really has to know that facility. But in a situation where there's an emergency on the street, it becomes even more challenging to understand all the different aspects of what's happened. We talked briefly about the train incident that occurred in East Palestine, Ohio. I'm from Ohio. I remember that incident. It was horrible. It was humongous. As we talked about yesterday, it caused a massive amount of evacuation. It caused a lot of environmental damage. And I guarantee you that that cleanup is going to be going on a long time, and it is really going to hurt the railroad company whose train wrecked and caused all that problem. So for whoever was the operations officer on that particular response, I pity them because I'm sure it was very difficult. So logistics officer, now that we all have computers, that job is much easier. But again, when you have a lot of different agencies responding in a big fire, you're going to have multiple fire departments responding. All of that requires logistics and planning. The other thing I will say about planning is it can be very difficult. In an emergency, things change quickly. This person has a hard job because we don't always know how something's going to turn out. We might think that we have the fire under control, but then all of a sudden the fire flashes back up again. So it's really important to have some kind of person that helps manage that process. They work very closely with the incident commander and the general staff. I mentioned some of this already, so I'll skip this slide. But the big thing for this particular position is records retention and ensuring that they're documenting and also tracking costs. If it involves an insurance company, which often it does, then they also have to help with the claims processing. Okay, so to move on a little bit, the big thing in summary is the ability to communicate during an emergency is really critically important. We avoid using slang terms or terms that not everybody would understand. I'm just going to skip the slide. Okay, so this is the important part too. Thank you. When we are planning for emergencies, we have to plan for all the emergencies that we can think of. Now, all of you, if I asked each one of you, you could come up with emergencies. So what we've done is we've tried to boil that down into 6 basic emergencies. We call it the integrated contingency plan. How it works is we look at what's going to happen in the first 30 to 60 minutes of any emergency, basic emergency, and we try to plan for that. It sounds simple, but to my point before, things could get better or things could get worse. So there's basic parts to this, and I'll skip through this a little bit. There's core sections, and if any of you work at a facility that has chemicals on it, you'd probably be asked to write some sort of plan like this. So section 1 just covers the overview of what's available at that particular facility. Who does what, role responsibilities. The core elements of the plan, there's 4 steps to it. There's the discovery of the emergency, then the initial response to the emergency. Maybe we just evacuate, that's our initial response. Then there's the sustained actions. To my point about the paint tanker out front, that's probably going to take a while to clean up. That would be your sustained actions. And then finally, there's the termination and the follow-up. That's where we say, okay, it's safe for you to go back home now. We've got this under control. These are the emergencies that I'd like to have you plan for as you do this. Fire explosion, we hear about that a lot, right? Evacuation or shelter in place. Evacuation means we will leave the hall and go outside. But let's say that there's something going on outside, then we might stay in the building, and that's called shelter in place. Big distinction, going outside or staying inside. Health emergencies, maybe somebody has a heart attack, so we have to consider those things. Or if we have people on our staff at our company who have health problems, we must know about that and be able to plan for that, say diabetes, and they have a sugar incident. We might want to include that. Mechanical system failure. What would happen if all the power went out now? All the lights, we'd be in the dark, I would have no microphone, I'd have to yell at you. But you need to consider that because in some facilities, the power being on is critical. Maybe it keeps a tank cool so it doesn't explode. And then the last 2 are spill and hazardous materials releases. We know about that. But the one we've had to start talking about even more is the security breach. All of my clients have to focus on securing their sites, not only because they might have chemicals, but they might have special information, top secret information, or whatever it might be. Section 4 gets into the description of emergency equipment. I know this doesn't sound all that exciting, but it guides what response I can make. If I only have the basic equipment and we have the big spill out front, none of you will be responding. We'll have to call professional people in to do that. Administration, the big thing on this is training and outreach. We've talked about that a little bit already, but it's critical. Have any of you here done evacuation drills? What to do? Thank you, Lois. Anybody, have you had to do a fire evacuation drill here, ever? It's okay, you can tell me. They're not willing to tell me. Well, it might be something you need to think about if you haven't done it, because look how many people we have here. Do you think if I said, okay, everybody out now down the steps, you could all make it? It might be tight. So we have to look at things like that as we do our planning. And then there's just a few last little bits here. We need to have good up-to-date maps of the facilities where the key things are. Fire protection maps. If we have fire extinguishers in different locations, we need to know where those are. We also want to know where the closest medical facilities are that can address our type of emergency. Because again, a little chemical burn from, say, a solvent might not be so bad, but if we have 10 people that are contaminated with something, then we will really have to address where we're going to take those people. And the last slide here is just a discussion of some of the other programs and plans that we might include with this. The ones highlighted in the yellow are things that my clients are starting to add. And lastly, I would just point out that quick reference sheets are a wonderful thing in an emergency because it doesn't force you to go through the whole plan to find the information you need. So if you can create snapshots for the people that are responding, the response will go better. Thank you. Let me check.
Okay, question time. Who would like to answer? Any question? Okay. Do you have another mic? I may have to ask some of those last benchers. I see a lot of noise from the last bencher. Let me come back to you. Okay. Okay. Ali ಯಾರನ್ನ ಒಬ್ಬನ ನೀವೇ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಯಪ್ಪ. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question.
Well, one second. Okay, what's the question? Go ahead.
So in case of spillage, say ethyl alcohol or any kind of alcohols, if it catches...
Kendra, there is a question.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, yes ma'am. In case of spillage, say ethyl alcohol or any kinds of alcohol, and it catches fire, what should be our first and most important priority to contain it? Say if we are the incident commander, and what will be our first response? Because adding water to it will make it worse. Adding carbon dioxide will also make it worse.
Okay. So, please.
Thank you. Okay, if I understand the question correctly, it was what to do if alcohol catches on fire. Okay, so my first question to you would be, is it methanol or is it ethanol?
Ethyl alcohol, ethanol.
Ethanol. Okay, ethanol actually is miscible in water, which means that it can be diluted with water. That's why, you can put water in a scotch alcohol drink. So you can actually use water to put a fire out for ethanol. The question becomes, how big is this spill? Because if it's a smaller spill, you might be able to clean it up with absorbent products. But if it's a larger spill, you might have to use copious amounts of water. In cases like that, we would say dilution is the solution, where you would just overflow the water onto the fire, and chances are you would be able to put the fire out. But again, that assumes different things. Is the ethanol on fire inside a tank, or is it on fire in the ground? So you could even leave the ethanol to burn without responding to it at all if it was safe to do that. So that's why you have to know the circumstances of the emergency in order to respond properly. Because in some cases you might do one thing, but in another case you might do another. And I would just also point out too that it's important to know what the material is exactly, because ethanol can be blended into a lot of different chemicals that may change the properties of how you would respond to that particular emergency.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Kendra. And I would like to talk to one of these individuals in this row. The one with checkered shirt, right next to you. Shirt, here. You. Yes. Checkered shirt. Please stand. Quickly, please stand. Okay. Okay. I know you are all listening. Can I say that? You are not listening to the speaker? Okay. Question to you. What is the name of the speaker?
It's my first name. You should know my first name.
No. You can sit down. You didn't know that? And so, that means you didn't listen to the introduction, right? So next time, listen to the introduction. Please sit down. Okay, I'll go this side. I saw one person, now I can't trace it. Okay, this side, this row, the yellow shirt. Please stand. What was the topic? What was the topic that the speaker presented? Give the mic, please. I can't hear you.
Basic emergencies.
Basic what?
Emergencies.
Basic emergency.
ICS positions.
What is ICS?
Incident command system.
Oh, wonderful. My dear friend, here is somebody answered the question, and here it is for you. Thank you. Please sit down. Okay. Let's move on to the next presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kendra, for your valuable information. Let's have a short tea break. Please help yourself and come back within 10 minutes. Please stick on to the time. We have to start our next session early. Just please come back in 10 minutes. Morning session attendance will be taken after the tea break.
Restrooms are the outside.
ಬಟ್ ಇವರು ನಾಚೆ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ ಇವ್ರಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಇವರೇ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹಾಗೆ ಟೀಚರ್ಸ್ ದೇ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಸೊ ನೌ ವಿ ಗೇವ್ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ನ ಸೊ ಒನ್ಸ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ದಟ್ ದೇ ಸೆಡ್ ಓಕೆ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಲೈಕ್ morning all got coffee here or so who is there no they had in very so it was my sorry no yeah not people one more very thin one thin person what is name so people came and bought everything and back Sunil ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ Sunil ಅಂಡರ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ Madam.
Just 2 hours looking. Hold on, I got a bunch of stuff for you. I am on Instagram. Okay. This is for you. SM Bennett 54.
Yeah, wait a second.
You can have the piece of paper.
Let me take a photo.
Oh, you can have the piece of paper. You don't. Yeah, that's why I got it.
Thank you for that.
And then I tell you what I brought for you as well. I brought a couple of these. Oh, shoot. I got too much stuff in my pocket. Here, these are drink coasters. Florida. Give me a second. I'm going to come out in a minute. Here we go. But for you and your friends, that's where I live, is in Florida. So they're drink coasters. You can sit your drinks on top of those.
Okay, yeah.
Friends over. All right? No. Thank you very much.
I should thank you for that one.
Oh, not a problem. I just.
Yeah. Really thought you.
No. Thank you guys very much.
Request everyone to get back to your seat. Settle down fast.
Mr. Stephen Bennett has over 40 Stephen Bennett has over 40 years of experience
consulting in safety and health management. We provided leadership to Fortune 1000 companies through the coordination and delivery of risk management solutions in the area of human and system performance, worker compensation, disability management, safety and health, behavioral management, ergonomics and risk information. He assisted in the development of workers' compensation, client solution to reduce injuries and associated cost within casualties related risk areas, including suitable diagnostic gap tools. These tools were used to quantify management performance in the area of noted above. His expertise including cross-section of multidisciplinary fields including loss prevention, regulatory management, industrial hygiene, workers' compensation, return to work, and employees' operational management and executive training. His consulting often includes the global solution, development and implementation. Sir, I request you to deliver a speech on safety auditing and qualifying methodology. Thank you.
This is my favorite topic of the four that I have. Not that all of them are good topics, but I love this topic. The good thing about auditing is that no matter what you ultimately do in your career, whether it's private industry, whether you go into government work, whether you're an engineer or in the sciences, we're going to turn that mic off over there. It is off? I don't know where I'm getting feedback from. But anyway, my point was, no matter what you ultimately do in your career, auditing processes is something that will occur. And I hope that some of these concepts will be applicable, whether it's about managing hazardous chemicals or what you ultimately do in your career. And that's not moving. I may be tied to this. Excuse me for a second. I need some help.
Maybe turn off that mic. The other side.
The mic's off. I'm not getting any movement on my slides. I think just.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm not getting any movement. That's my. I'm sorry for that. Today, my agenda, quite simply, is to go over what are some of the methodologies, why we do risk assessment, why we do auditing, talk about the philosophy. I want to spend most of my time looking at some of the samples that I brought to demonstrate the various ways that one can audit inside a facility. And then for me, collecting the data, constructing the audit, which is, as technical people, will sometimes see as though that's the most important thing that can be done. And the message I want to leave you with, that's only about 40% of the process. What's important from auditing is not the audit itself, it's your ability to communicate that information to the people that are going to use that and improve the organization. So communication of your results, the one thing I want you to remember, for people who are going to be asking questions later, is that how I communicate results is what's important about my audits. Every organization, I've got to talk about this, no matter what size, no matter what types of risk you have, everyone needs to be in the auditing or into auditing processes. And if you go from one organization to the next, and as a consultant, I've seen hundreds of organizations. The odd part is that great audits don't necessarily have to look the same in any way, shape, or form. Why do we conduct audits? Compliance audits. I have state, governmental. I may have some global regulations that I need to ensure we are following. I do audits to ensure that we're to make certain that we are in compliance. I look at my internal processes that the organization has set up. Again, I want to document the fact that we not only do we have the processes, but that we are following those processes. I want to verify the application of the process. I have a new process in place. How well have we taken the training and applied that training and the process? Continuous improvement. I want to be in a position where today I'm at this level, and over a period of time I want to improve my organization. In developing an audit, I gave 4 things that I thought were extremely important. Fairness and accuracy. Obviously, I want my results to come out and give a correct picture of whatever I'm auditing. So I'm looking at a particular department in a manufacturing plant. I want to ensure that my audit results are exactly what's going on in that facility. Consistency. I want to know that if I do the audit, if Brandon does the audit, if Bob West does the audit, if you do the audit, that our results are going to be relatively consistent. A term from yesterday, but I want to have consistency of results. Impact, I want to know that as a result of my audit, we are able to take actions to improve the corporation. And lastly, longevity. What I want to do is I want to build an audit that I know is going to be in place for years. The types of audits that are out there, there's a process or program, lockout, tagout. I'm going to work on equipment. I need to make certain that equipment's de-energized. Confined space. I'm going to put people inside of a tank where there could potentially be a lack of oxygen. I need to have a program in place to ensure that those individuals are protected. PMS is process safety management. That's a program that's around typically where I have a chemical manufacturer that has enclosed systems, and do I have processes in place to prevent catastrophic loss. From an organizational perspective, I have department audits. So my manufacturing departments, shipping, receiving, maintenance, I need to be able to audit each of those organizations. A facility-wide audit, and then maybe if I have a global or a large corporation, my ability to have an organizational audit. How do we conduct audits? There's 3 principles, there's probably others, there's 3 principal methodologies. Observation. I go out into the facility and I observe what's going on, and are we following process correctly? I interview people. I talk to them about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And lastly, I review documents. Going back to confined space, I should have a form every time someone enters a confined space that we use as a checklist. So I can go back and review those forms to make certain that they were properly completed. I'm old school. Paper and pen is the way that I tend to do my audits, but in today's universe, cell phone and tablets are the common methodology for collecting audit data. The easy part is obviously it takes that information and immediately puts in the system for you. What's some of the problems that can occur when we're auditing? Overemphasis on compliance, and I'll talk about this much more tomorrow in my session, but compliance is important, but in the case of safety, I will tell you that how people do their job, things that are way beyond compliance, are much more important. Complicating, and again, as technical people, we sometimes have a tendency to overcomplicate the scoring matrix so that we've got this wonderful system that's going to create these unbelievably accurate numbers. They typically aren't going to work. Keep things as simple as possible. Too many metrics. I've got 150 questions. It's hard to get through an audit at that point in time. Keep my number of questions short. At the end, I have too many metrics. I may have too many actions. If at the end of the day I've completed an audit, I've got 25 problems I've identified, how can I combine them down so I have a much smaller list? An inability to prioritize. Another key point, not getting cross-functional input. When you're putting your audit together, you want to go talk to everyone who potentially could be involved. Talk to operations in a manufacturing plant. Talk to the maintenance. Talk to engineering. I would talk to a number of different people to make certain that my audit questions are getting the types of responses that we want. And the last is I'm doing audits, and every time I get the same response back from each one that I do, that's not necessarily a good sign. I put this slide in for one purpose, is that and it's going to tie back when I talked about how to communicate our results. But when we think about, at the end of the day, I've done these audits, I have a series of results available, and I'm just going to go back and feed this to senior management, tell them what I found, right? In an organization, there are certain things that are critical and important to the organization as a whole, not necessarily to me or my department. It could be safety and health, injury and illness prevention. Of many organizations, that's a high priority for them. Not being out of compliance with regulations. They want to know that they are meeting the standards, and so on. Minimizing various costs. We talked about yesterday, customer relations is unbelievably important. The reputation of the brand of the company can be important. Now, why do I go through that slide? When you look at the end of your audit and you've got your results together, how can I tie my issues, my problems that I found, how can I tie those to one of those issues that happens to be important to my organization? I have clients and take this correctly, they were good organizations, but safety and health and injury prevention was not important to them. I had to tie my results to customer relations and brand reputation because that was what was important to the organization. So make certain when you're giving your presentation, your results tie into what's important to the company. Oh, good. And this is where I want to spend some time. I talked about different types of audits. And this example here is a department audit. I don't want you to read all the words. The words are not important. But what you'll notice, I'm going to switch hands. I'm not ambidextrous. I can't see it. I'm going to have to walk out. Forgive me. If you look at the questions, what you'll notice is they're relatively simple and straightforward. My department audit should be constructed so a supervisor, and in the best case, an hourly worker can conduct that audit. So I want to make my questions, what I'm looking for, I want to make them relatively simple and straightforward. We come over, and what is it that I'm capturing? Yes and no, black and white. Accuracy of results and consistency of results is one of the things you want. If I'm building an audit for others to use, and particularly if they're going to be at, again, supervisor level or lower, I want the structure of my audit to be very simple. I talk about process safety management as one of the programs that's important to an organization, or can be. Again, it's not about the words, but what you see is now it's a much more complex matrix, because now we have a very technical subject. Engineers, my safety professionals, those are the only people that will be applying this type of audit. And now what I have is I have who's it targeted to, different groups of people if I'm going to do my interviews. So this is going to tell me that. This is my question. Here, again, because this is very regulatory driven, I'm going to have a reference so that not only do I know, here's what we're looking at, this is my issue I have, but here happens to be the regulation that responds to that. So if someone wants to be more technical on a particular issue, they can say, we have a deficiency here. Now let's go read and understand precisely what the regulation says. And lastly, because this is a regulatory-driven audit we're conducting. For this client, although it is still it's a black and white type of a response, what you'll notice, it's no longer yes and no. It is in essence acceptable, or there's an exception. Because what most organizations don't want to do, they don't want to say yes or no. They don't want to say, no, we're not in compliance with a particular standard. You are kind of, you're flagging yourself as a problem. So what they will say instead is there's an exception. If we're not where we want to be. So again, it's words, it's semantics. It's still a straightforward audit. There's only two choices that are given, but it's a much more highly technical audit. So you see that, I hope you can see the difference between the two levels. Departmental audits, very simple, straightforward. Compliance audits, program audits like this become much more complex in their structure. Now that didn't come across well, but the reason I put this in here is because now this is from a consulting perspective, one of my favorite tools is a fishbone. And when we go to clients, this is overwhelming to them intentionally. We normally don't like to do this. But what this is, we're trying to say, what drives positive and acceptable safety outcomes? And although these three in the middle on the top are US-centric, the rest of them, what type of information management systems do I have? What type of safety and health processes do I have? What's my culture in the organization? My procedures, training and education, and what I do for continuous improvement. We use this as a tool to say, if you do, as an organization, if you're doing these things, you're going to be having better outcomes from safety. This led to, now we're looking at an organizational audit. Now the difference that you see, one, and I think at the end of the day we had a total of only 30 questions based upon all that data you saw on that fishbone. We have we have the question, we have what is it that we're managing to, so what are we trying to measure, and then we have the question, and then we have four components. I misspoke. And so now it's more complex. I'm no longer guessing and knowing this. I'm now taking a particular part of the client's operation and I'm saying, are they world class? Do they have a best-in-class, an outstanding process in this particular area? Do they have a functional process? They're making X amount of input, and are they getting more of that back and output? Are they getting a positive output from their efforts? If they do, they have a functioning process. Needs improvement. They have a process in place. They're putting in so much energy in, but they're not getting the desired output. They're not getting what they needed. In a case like that, they need improvement. And then needs development is a nice way to say they have nothing in place at all. Much more now, yes, no, acceptable, exception, to now world-class functional needs improvement, needs development. All auditing processes, all used by different people. The department audit, I'm potentially going to give to tens and maybe hundreds of people. It needs to be simple, straightforward for people to do. My department audit could be done by tens of people. So I've got to train them, and but it can be much more structured, and it's going to more than likely be used by people who are technically competent in those areas. And then lastly, I have an audit like this, which is very complex, very nuanced. And in my organization, we only had about 35 consultants, and we trained less than 20. So just a little over half of our staff was allowed to conduct this type of an audit. So even with safety professionals, we squeeze the number down. So my point of all this was, when you're looking at audits, look at the type you want to do, look at who's going to be conducting the audit, and then you can start to construct your audit from that point. I wanted to talk about risk assessment. This is going to lead me to risk assessment. Risk assessment, because we use the term constantly yesterday, it is a subset of auditing. It's a quantification tool for risk in a process. And what I gave you is a client that, quite honestly, I'll make this very simple, they were a best-in-class organization. They had safety processes in place, they were doing a great job, but they wanted to continually improve, so they asked us to come in and help them build something that would help them do a better job. My background doesn't help me here. In risk assessment, and this is an example, and I'll show you a second one, there's a million ways to look at risk assessment. But in risk assessment, typically what we have is what is the likelihood of the occurrence, of the event, whatever the hazard. So from it occurs frequently to it's unbelievably unlikely. Then we look at what's the severity. We use the term quite often in our presentations, catastrophic, all the way down to negligible. The color coding can vary, that again from client to client, but the red, these 5 boxes over here are indicators that we have too much risk for from that organization's perspective. They don't want to have that type of risk in their facilities. So that if we look at a particular process and we end up saying there could be critical injuries and it's a probable occurrence and it's here, that's a red flag, as those boxes are red, but it's a red flag that they want to take action to improve. So risk assessment, this company's looking at likelihood and a consequence, and they make a matrix operation by operation, and so they'll know where they have high to where they have low risk in their organization, so now they can prioritize what they want to do. My other example I wanted to show you, we had a client that had processes in place on the quality side, and so we wanted to take their same concept. They had 3. They looked at how often, frequency, how often it occurred. We looked at likelihood, how likely is it to have the bad impact, and then what was that severity. So they had 3 different, not 2. And again, they had a numbering system that was already in place, so we used their numbering system so that when we build something from a safety and health perspective, when you build something, no matter what your profession becomes, you want it to look, in most cases, like what the corporation's already doing. At the end of the day, and it was simple, you'd have a particular activity, you'd have frequency, likelihood, severity, multiply those together and come up with a number. So for the first client, their risk assessment came out in a color-coded system, and that's all they were looking for. In this system, much more technical, much more numbers-driven organization, they wanted to come out numerically. And again, at the end, they looked at all their operations, they ranked them. The highest ranking then became the one that they started working on because it was where they had the greatest likelihood of having a catastrophic or unfortunate event happen. Make sense? There was a lot of information there, and I know there's more, but I don't want you to comprehend all, other than, I'll go back. Auditing, done at different levels. Risk assessment, again, if your organization, I should say, is already doing risk assessment in another part of the company, model after that. If not, you can go online and look at these. The first one is let's go back there. It's a much simpler process to apply something like this. As I said in my intro, doing the audits, which is difficult and hard and all those types of things, it takes tons of time. We're only about 40% of the way there. I think the most important part of your audit is how you're going to communicate results to management. Or I'll even go, it could be whoever your audience is. There are times when my audience is the engineering staff, or it could be financial people. And I'll use those two, although they're very different. Engineering and finance tend to be numbers-oriented, detail-oriented, and I'm going to have a different presentation for them than for my senior manager. I talked about business terms, that slide earlier about reputation, cost, customer relations, safety and health. Take my safety issues and try to put them into business terms whenever I have a chance. And on the risk assessment, the piece to know, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on risk tolerance, other than say what risk tolerance means is how much risk is an organization willing to accept. We had a client, and one of my consultants came back and they brought me their risk assessment chart they put together, and the top one was multiple fatalities, and the next was fatalities, and I said, stop. I said, a fatality is not acceptable. Why do we have two categories for multiple fatalities and fatalities when we were building our matrix for the risk assessment? And he said their operations are so hazardous that from a probability, and so they could focus their efforts, they needed to split those areas out where they had the potential to, unfortunately, they had the potential to kill multiple people versus just a single person. And at the end of the day, I kind of let it go. It wasn't what I wanted to have happen, but you need to understand the risk tolerance of the organization. I talked about the hot buttons, the business priorities. I will repeat things multiple times because they're the important issues, by the way. The other thing I would tell you, particularly if you're talking to senior management, they don't get to talk to hourly employees very often. And anytime you can provide feedback that you've gotten through your auditing process, one of those things was having an observation discussion, rather not an observation, but a discussion with the worker. Anytime you can give them direct feedback from their employees can be very, very powerful. And the last, it may be the most important of all of the issues that I'll talk about, is that particularly when you're talking to management, and whether plant management, senior management, they have a lot of problems and issues on their plate to begin with every day. The last thing they need is for you to complete your audits and for you to walk into their office and say, here's 5 more things you need to worry about. You haven't done them any good, you haven't done yourself any good. When you're finished with your audit, every item that you've identified, bring them with a solution set so you can help them and start to guide them to corrective action. This page is mine because this is things that I think that I've learned through presenting to management over the years, and I will tell you, there are exceptions to the rule. You'll have an organization that's extremely technical and you'll need to provide tons of detail, and I've been there. But in most cases, I will tell you, people remember things in 3s. If you have issues, try to keep them, and I know it can be hard at times, keep them. If I've got 9 issues, I bunch them into groups of 3s, and I talk about the 3 most important, the middle 3, and the lowest 3. Make it simple for your audience. And you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, keep it simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points is what I would tell you. Try to keep your slides to no more than 5 bullet points. And not that I did it here because I have a very technical audience, but for senior management, try to keep it to 5 words per bullet point. Make your presentation simple. Like you haven't heard me say this, if you identify issues, give them solutions. And the last thing I will tell you is, because safety, I won't say has the least priority, that's not fair. It has the least understanding in most organizations. Always know a shorter version of your presentation. You've got a 20-minute presentation, you're ready to go into senior management and tell them how they can improve something. And all of a sudden they walk in and they go, this company just took too much time. Can you make that 10 minutes long? Always in your back pocket, have a simpler process, because by doing that, you want to make certain you cover that which is important to you and that which will gather or gain them some success through your solutions. So have a shorter presentation. I wanted to give you an example of a presentation that we make to senior managers, and you'll sit there and go, whoa, Steve, you just lied to me. Look at all these words on this page. The point where I want you to focus, though, is on this third column, and what you'll see is we did like a traffic light. Green is good, yellow means it's cautionary, we need to be watching what's going on, red means we have a problem. Now, from as far away as you are, you carry out in front, and they think that my vision is such that I can read that. I can read the card. But anyway, what I was going to say is, so we're having a lot of injuries with the hands, and it's irritation that's occurring. So I've put the chart in, I've got a red circle here. I'm drawing the attention of my management team to what my issue is, and now I want to try to get them to realize we need to put gloves on people. It's a simple way to help focus the solution direction. And I put this in here again, extremely busy, but for the organization that's highly analytical, highly detailed, and there are those, and there's nothing wrong with very detailed organizations, you may need to provide that because they want to see all that detail. So I'm going to make my 5 minutes because I'm on my last slide. Conclusions. Auditing methodology should agree with how the corporation is doing auditing from a safety perspective. Whatever perspective you're using, you ought to try to assimilate your auditing practices in how the company's doing auditing otherwise. You've got audits for different levels: department, program, organizational, simple to highly complex. Our presentation, be prepared for different audiences.
Okay. Oh, you have a question. Okay.
So myself, Satish Subramanian.
My colleagues, and see, we'll do some research and come back with some response to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. I have a question.
Oh, be quick.
Sir, how frequently should the safety audits be done, and how economical is it to do an audit on a longer span?
You know, I go back, departmental audits are done very frequently. And they should be very short. They should be quick, simple audits to be done. And so if you look at kind of from department to process to organizational audits, the time would be, you would do much more of the departmental audits. I've seen companies that do them daily. I'd argue that's too often in most cases, but weekly, monthly audits are quite frequent. When I look at process audits, and I go like, if you look at confined space, I should do a confined space audit. Well, I was going to say, depending upon how often I'm doing them, I'd tell you I like to see them done at least monthly to quarterly. A function of what the regulation says, secondarily, how often you're using those processes, and then organizational audits to me are fairly infrequent.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. There was one question here, so be quick.
Hello. Yeah, hi. Amazing talk. It contained both qualitative and quantitative descriptions about how to deal with risks, and in the context of auditing an organization or a department or in a particular part of the organization. So my question is, so when you were, like you gave an example of how different scores are being used to give a final score.
So it seemed to me as if it's a weighted addition of the various scores. So does this, like, is there a hard and fast rule that we need to follow, or does it change from domain to domain, or for example, in an organization level it is different, at a team level it's different, and something like that. So that's the question.
You are making a presentation than a question. Did you follow the question?
Is it about the frequency of audits?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think there is no simple answer to the question. Every organization is different. In an office environment, I'll take the least hazardous. Doing some type of an audit once a year is more than enough, right? We're in a manufacturing plant, like in a foundry, doing a weekly audit of departmental type audits, I think is highly critical because foundries are very dangerous environments. So you have to look at that risk component of your business. You have to look at how often whatever we're referencing is being done. And a confined space, we were talking about a second. If I make 2 confined space entries a year, and that's it, in the U.S., from a regulatory perspective, I need to do an audit once a year, and that's what I would do. If I'm doing 15 confined space entries a week, I'm going to be doing my audit much more frequently than that because, you know what I'm saying, because that process is happening on a regular basis, and I want to make certain that we're not degrading our standard operating procedures at any point in time. So there's a continuum, if that makes any sense. How often it happens, how hazardous it is, and then from there I make a decision as how frequently I need to do that. And then my backstop is we'll have some regulatory requirements that are going to force me to do an audit at some point in time.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Where are the RV college students? I would like to talk to them. RV college, where are they? Oh, they are here. So I welcome all of the RV students coming here. Thank you, thank you. Now, can I ask a question, or you don't want me to ask any questions?
Incidentally, sir is also from RV.
I used to teach chemistry part-time for the RV engineering student long before you were born. So it doesn't matter when it was. My question to you is who was the speaker?
Stephen Bennett.
Okay, good. And so you want one question to be answered? This is for you. Okay, good luck to you. Okay, for you, Stephen explained the frequency of audits in response to the questions from 2 different people. Okay, so what should be the frequency of audits? You remember that he made a presentation
Safety
on
auditing.
right?
Yes, sir.
What is the frequency? I know I'm asking you a tough question, giving you a tough question.
Yes.
What is the frequency of audits, and what did Stephen say about it?
Safety editing, safety editing, tell how to management, so that, and risk and auditing.
What's the frequency? How quickly you have to do?
Management.
Okay, you can sit down. Yeah. Is there anyone who can answer that question? Please stand up.
Departmental audits are more frequent and organizational audits are less frequent.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Richard, you have something to give him? Thank you. Give me a minute, I will be done with that. Please quickly give something to him. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next speaker, please.
Thank you, sir. I now welcome our EVP, Sir Rahul Kaluri. Please, students, give him a big round of applause. It's an honor of mine to introduce our next speaker to you guys, which is Lois Okrando. So over here, Lois has 30 years of operational leadership experience in manufacturing, global sourcing, and project management. She has led multiple facilities, both unorganized as well as non-unionized environments. She has an experienced sourcing leader in multiple industries, aviation, application, as well as industrial heating. Lois has extensive experience in global supply chain. As a lead leader, she has designed the manufacturing layout plant in Romania. As chief manufacturing engineer, she solved quality and production issues at a plant in France. As executive sourcing leader, she worked with suppliers in Asia, Europe, Canada, Mexico, and majority of 50 states in US. As an executive leader of composite commodity, in 2010 to 2013, she has led a global team based in UK and US that required a significant increase in the global supply-based capacity and capabilities due to rapid growth. At Chromalox, Liz oversaw the purchasing, quality, safety, and customer service while also directing the plant's operation in US. Mexico as well as China, she has defined the strategies to boost the overall capacity while maximizing the supply chain challenges. Prior to Chromalox, she worked in Roper Corporation, where she has transformed the plant to increase the output by 60%. She has moved 7 times overall in her career. Now I welcome our speaker to all our students. Thank you.
Hello again. How's everybody doing? Excellent. Now you remember I like participation, right? So are you warmed up? Okay, good. So Steve talked about the audits, right? So I'm going to talk about how do you prepare that audit? How do you identify the hazards? And then how do you put together what you need to audit? So he showed you how to do that. I'm going to give you the materials behind that on how to make that happen. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So Steve did a really good job of telling you the importance of assessing the environmental hazards. And so that'll be really good. And then we have several different types of environmental hazards. And there's many more, but these are basic 4 groups. You have chemical hazards. We've talked a lot about chemistry and the chemicals that could be bad, and the toxicity, and the dosing, and all of that makes them hazard. Physical hazards. Actually, Robin talked about some of the physical solids. And then there's also noise, vibration, temperature extremes, biological hazards. A lot of your bacteria, things like COVID, things like flus, what are we doing to protect people not to get those kind of viruses? Allergens, toxins produced by fungi or mushrooms. And then ergonomic hazards. We talked a little bit about ergonomic hazards yesterday. And ergonomics is caused, it's the study of repetitive motions and making sure that we don't have repetitive motions, awkward positions. So let me ask the audience, are you in an awkward position right now? Is anybody's back starting to hurt? Right? You've been sitting all day? Yes. And so what's something you could do to help yourself so you don't have a sore back. You could do like what we did earlier. Rampur lets you go take a quick break, right? And so you go walk around and then that helps you, okay? So the process where we're looking at identifying the hazards and understanding what could the possible hazards be,